Assalamu alaikum, everybody. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ويعلم الصابرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm assuming that you can all hear me and see me loud and clear, inshallah. And what we're going to do in today's session is a little bit special. I wanted to get round a little bit faster to the Q&A session because I think that there's a lot of questions, not only questions, but your own comments as well. By the way, I would like to point out that your comments have been massively helpful. I personally have found them really insightful. Each and every one of you. Like, I don't think there's anybody who has passed a comment whose comment has not benefited in some way. And it just shows how masterful the Quran is and how much more special it is when we put our minds together. It is very rare. I want to say this now, and I want everybody to understand it. It is very rare to have a group that you can actually discuss the Quran with. Right? Some people, they have book clubs. They read a book, they get together and they discuss that book. It's very difficult to do that with the Quran. And I think one of the reasons why is because of this kind of self-righteous attitude that exists regarding it, or you feel like you are inadequate, or sometimes there might be somebody who's better versed in the Quran and you just let them take the lead entirely. But what we've managed to accomplish is this kind of environment where everybody has their own contributions to give, and those contributions are appreciated. And that's a really nice balance to gain. So, inshallah, we are going to have more sessions like that. But today, what I wanted to do is focus on a very special surah. Now, this surah is a surah which you are all familiar with. It is a surah which is repeated often. In fact, the Quran refers to it as the seven often repeated ayat, seven often repeated verses. It's a surah without which none of your prayers are accepted. I mean your salah, right? If you stumble across this hadith and you think none of my prayers are accepted unless I recite this surah, it's actually a kind of a not a great translation. It's referring to the salah. Every salah that you recite, what does it begin with? Surah Al-Fatiha. Now, Surah Al-Fatiha is one of those things that we might take for granted because we recite it so often and because we've memorized it when we were young, thanks to the blessings of our parents. Reverts who have newly come to the religion of Islam, it's one of the first things that they will do is to memorize Surah Al-Fatiha. Now, when you keep on repeating it, sometimes, you might feel like it's losing some of its charm. God forbid. Sometimes you might feel like because I'm repeating it so often, the effect that it should be having on me is lessened. Actually, look at what the Quran is saying. We've given you the seven oft repeated ayat. The opposite case is true if all the things that we've discussed in the previous sessions about keeping an open mind, about keeping an open heart, about contemplation and extrapolation still exist. So kind of similar to what we did before, I want to keep you guys like active, right? Keep your extrapolations ready, and if you would like to share them at the end, please do them. Why am I saying this? Because Surah Fatiha is such an important surah in the sense that if you go and look at what the Mufassirin have said and the ideas that you gain from the ahadith, is that the entire Quran is basically a tafsir of Surah Fatiha itself. That's right. The entire Quran is basically just expanding on the ideas of Surah Fatiha. This is a long-term project that I've had in the back of my mind. So we have these 7 verses. Why not, when we're going through the rest of the Quran, relate them back to one of these 7 verses and try to understand where those other verses of the entire Quran actually fit in, right? But in order to do that, we need to put our thinking caps back on and actually go through this surah. And what I want to do is actually just expand on some of the concepts and ideas which are central to the surah of Fatiha. In order that whenever we are reciting the salah, inshallah, or whenever we decide to recite Surah Fatiha, these ideas come back to us, inshallah, and it helps us to gain that familiarity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, I have a thinking turban on. Nice. Uh, okay, so let's begin. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I want to start with this. Why do we begin the Quran with أعوذ بالله? Many people don't know this. The Quran itself has commanded us that when you recite the Quran, when you begin the Quran, you should begin with أعوذ بالله. What does it mean? I seek refuge with Allah from the shaitan, the accursed, the repelled one. Why? What is the wisdom behind this? Why do we begin with this? Well, one of the reasons may be this, that even when you are reciting the Quran, you are not necessarily safe from the insinuations of Shaitan and his minions, his children, his servants and slaves. They will come along and whisper in your ear. They will come along and give you a false understanding of the Quran. When Allah is giving you verses about mercy, about rahmah, you will think that it doesn't apply to you. He will snatch away your feeling of hope, of love of Allah, of recognizing that when you're reciting the Quran, Allah is pouring His blessings down upon you. Okay, so before you recite any surah of the Quran, begin with this, A'udhu billah, fasta'idh billah. Right? The Quran teaches us to seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many people don't know, but this is one of the mustahab acts. When you're reciting the salah, the first thing you do, Allahu Akbar, you begin your salah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Right? So it's actually mustahab to begin even the salah with أعوذ بالله in the first rak'at. All right? Now we go to Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. One of the verses that we just always overlook and we forget about. Bismillah is very, very important. Bismillah, if you can do it before Allahu Akbar as well. Somebody asked in the comments that why can't you say A'udhu Billah before Allahu Akbar, the Takbiratul Ihram, and I'm just quickly answering that question. That of course you can. There's no problem in that either. But the interesting point for me is after you begin the salah and you do the Takbiratul Ihram, even then it is mustahab to do it, right? Now, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, what does it literally mean? Because many of the translations, they'll tell you, I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, the Affectionate, the Most Kind, the Especially Kind, right? And there's all sorts of translations, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. What's the difference between these two? Many of you might be familiar with this, but it's okay to have a bit of a recap about it. First of all, literally, it means in the name of Allah, the kind, the especially kind, or the most kind, the especially kind. Okay? So this is something that we have been commanded to do before we start any significant action. One thing that I often tell kids is even before you start to play, say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Why not? People have this misconception that you should only say Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim before doing a holy act, before doing a good act, before eating your food, for example, or before going to sleep, for example. But if you're doing something vain, like playing or watching a movie, saying Bismillah seems a little bit arbitrary. We shouldn't do that. Maybe that's disrespectful. No! Even before doing that seemingly arbitrary act, by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, I start in the name of Allah, you're actually making that seemingly arbitrary and vain action into a kind of act and worship, and an act of worship of Allah. Because what you're essentially saying is, yeah, I'm about to play this sport, or I'm about to start this video game. I'm on level 25. Or you're starting to watch a drama. Even then, by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you're actually saying, I'm starting this in the name of Allah. And thereby, even that becomes an act of worship. But now, why does Allah introduce himself as the most merciful? He could have introduced himself as anything, as the creator, as the fashioner, as the most punishing, as the most the one who knows, the all-knowing, the omnipresent. There's 99 names of Allah, they say. Why not choose any of those names? At the beginning of 113 out of 114 surahs of the Holy Quran, he teaches us to begin in the name of Allah, who is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And this is the underlying message behind all of the Quran and indeed all of Islam. It's always been about mercy. It's very interesting. I was having a discussion with somebody a few days ago, a few months ago, in fact, and I said, if there is a trait that Imam Zaman alayhi salam will tell us to adopt when he returns, inshallah, what do you think that trait is? And amazingly, this person said, I think it's kindness. I think it's mercy. And if you search within your hearts, you'll find that we're living in a very dark world. Yes, we have to fight against so many misconceptions, and we have to be on the battlefield, we have to be doing jihad and all the rest of it. But the underlying reason behind all those efforts is mercy. There's mercy missing from the world. There's so many poor people who are not being fed. There's so many people who are oppressed. There's so much even inside people's households that are taking place that are tearing apart families. What is the missing ingredient? Many people, I believe, if they search within their hearts, they will find it is mercy, love, kindness, gentleness, being nice to each other. I mean, why is it so difficult for people to understand that? Mercy. Of all the names Allah could choose to introduce himself to humanity, he chooses mercy. But he doesn't just choose mercy. No, no, no. He doesn't stop there. He divides mercy into two distinct types of mercy. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. What's the difference between these two? Very quickly, because I'm sure many of you have already heard this, but I want to remind you once again. There is his Rahmaniyya and his Rahimiyya. His Rahmaniyya is referring to his general mercy, the mercy which pervades throughout the heavens and the earth. This kind of mercy goes to everything, the trees, the mountains, the plants, the animals, and all the human beings, the angels, the jinns, whether they are believers or disbelievers, is irrelevant. That Rahmaniyya is for all of his creation. Then he has Rahimiyya, and this is his special kind of mercy. This mercy is reserved only for the believers, those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken as his special servants, as his special friends. Let's go to the next verse. After saying Bismillah, the first thing Allah tells us is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to the Lord of the worlds. Immediately, and just imagine when you are praying Salah, this is one of the first things that you are actually saying. Immediately, Allah is reminding you that He is the Rabb, which means the Lord, or it literally means the nourisher, the one who's looking after, the caretaker, almost like a parent figure. You see, in the Western world, if a mother stays at home, she's known as a housewife, right? And this is often seen as a very derogatory thing. It shouldn't be. It's a very honorable thing for a mother to stay at home and to raise her children and to look after the household. In the Arab world, such women are known as Rabbatul Bayt, the lord of the house, right? Or the lordess of the house. And so therein is this idea of one who is carefully and meticulously taking care of the household, nourishing the children and growing everybody. All right. And this is how Allah is introducing Himself to you for the worlds. The worlds. And this is where your extrapolation comes into it. If you go to the Tafsir, it's saying, what are these worlds? Well, number one, it's talking about the external and internal worlds, not just you and your inner dimensions, because as Imam Ali alayhi salam said, you think you're only a tiny entity, yet within you is the entire universe. Allah is the Rabb of all of those universes. As well as that, the external world, He is the Rabb of every human being on the planet. And not only that, this is an allusion to the idea that there are other planets, other worlds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Rabb of all of them. And just very quickly, aliens certainly do exist according to my research. There are distant planets with intelligent life forms. They, as far as I can see from the ahadith and from the words of our great scholars like Imam Khomeini, they are benevolent, they are good, they are kind. And eventually what we're going to have to do after the Zuhur of Imam Zaman and after this entire planet is covered with justice and inshallah mercy, then we're going to have to go to other planets and spread Islam to the other dimensions, to the other creatures, wherever they are in the different planets and the different worlds that exist out there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you are reciting the Quran, especially Surah Al-Fatiha, when you're reciting the Salah, He's not only connecting you to Him, He's connecting you to all the worlds and making you realize that there is a oneness about everything in existence, and He's connecting you thereby to all of existence. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And then He repeats again, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He is the most merciful, the especially merciful, just in case you forgot it. The number one thing that we have to spread throughout the world is, and the worlds indeed, is mercy, this love, this kindness. Imagine what a nice world this would be if the people who are destined for hell hurried up and just went there, and all the good people were left. This world would pretty much become almost like a Jannah in and of itself. No, but this place is always going to have a mix of people, good and bad, and it's always going to be a place of testing for us. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. He is the king or the sovereign of the Day of Judgment. The Day of Judgment, herein you see the Aqidah of Islam, the belief system of Islam is inculcated within Surah Al-Fatiha, and you can discover it just by contemplating over these verses. After the initial verses and all the discussions that we've had so far, you see that suddenly He says He is the Lord or the King of the Day of Judgment. This is how important the Day of Judgment really is. The Day of Judgment, dear brothers and sisters, is not a day. It is not 24 hours. right? It could last for millennia. It could last for centuries, hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of years, right? The day of judgment is the day of sifting and sorting, and everybody getting the rewards, realizing what they've done in their short moment of life, and how that translates to the hereafter. And it's a gateway towards the Jannah or the hellfire. Okay, so Allah is immediately drawing your attention to the day of judgment and reminding you that He's the king on that day. Right? Right now, you have this strange free will, right? Where you're doing all this stuff, and you know, and right now it's the night time actually. It's actually nighttime. Why is it called the day of judgment? Because the day is when everything is clear, everything is seen. The sun has risen. And on the day of judgment, this is something that really gave me shudders when I learnt about it. You know what the sun is on the day of judgment? It's the light of Allah. It's not just a celestial body like we have right now. This sun, which is like maybe a burning ball of gas billions of miles away, whatever, right? No, that light, that sun, the dawning of that sun on the day of judgment is the light of Allah. And through it, all things become absolutely clear. There will be no hiding. You will have kafir written on your head. It will be glaringly obvious who you are, what you believed in, what actions you did, the murderers, the thieves, the liars, the hypocrites. There will be no more hiding. This era that we're living in right now is kind of the night of judgment, right? Since Adam, since the beginning of creation up until the day of judgment, it's all been nighttime. And in the night, thieves can hide in the shadows. People will not be able to see other people and recognize them clearly. You know, if you see somebody in the darkness of the night, you won't be able to recognize them. So you won't be able to know, is this person honest? Is this person truthful about what they're saying, or are they lying? You don't know. You have to make a guess. You have to make an estimate. You have to try to understand through their other actions and stuff. You have to calculate. On the day of judgment, it's not like that. Everything becomes clear. There is no more hiding. Okay, and you have to ask yourself if that gives you a sense of comfort or a sense of fear, and that will be central to um, defining your whole outlook on existence itself. Maliki Yawmiddin. Okay, so Surah Fatiha, by the way, is almost divided in half. Half of it is just introducing Allah. Once you've introduced Allah and you've recognized Him, then the next part of the surah is actually the dua, the prayer, the prayer. Think about that. Out of all the prayers that Allah could have made us recite repetitively, He could have made us ask for rizq, sustenance. He could have made us ask for knowledge. He could have made us ask for, I don't know, good health. He could have made us ask for children or marriage or a million different things. What does He tell us to pray for? We're going to come to that in a moment. But before we come to that prayer, we say something very central, almost like if Surah Fatiha is divided into two, smack bang, right in the middle of it, what do we say? إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Thee alone do we worship, and Thee alone do we ask for help. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. You alone do we worship. Ibadah, this worship. What is it really? One translation, which I've seen, which is a beautiful translation, they didn't even translate this as worship. They translated it as you alone do we conform to. And I absolutely loved that translation, because when you say you alone do we worship, immediately your mind goes to, for example, salah, bowing and doing sujood, putting your hands up, oh Allah. Okay, we think of acts of worship. But actually, ibadah is talking about true servitude. It's talking about this idea that you only conform to the Rabbul Alameen. You don't conform to any other people. You don't listen to any other people. You see only God, you hear only God, you obey only God. It's only God. The only reason we obey the prophets and imams, in fact, is because they are wasilas to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only reason you're listening to this lecture right now is because, inshallah, this lecture and these discussions and sessions can be a bridge, a wasila, for you to better understand your Lord. The only reason you eat your food is so that you can be sustained for a little while longer, so that you can better understand Him and conform to Him. This ayah is basically telling us that we will never, ever, 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 in any of our actions, in any of our thoughts, disobey Allah, rebel against Allah, like Shaitan did. Okay? Then, إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone do we ask for help. You alone do we ask for help. But we ask all sorts of people for help. You know, all of this discussion, these polemical debates that take place online between Shias and Sunnis and those who believe and accept the idea of tawassul and those who reject the ideas of tawassul, they would be put to rest forever if people just contemplated on this tiny phrase of the ayah. You alone do we ask for help. If we just contemplated over that. Why? Because if you reflect on your own life, you're always asking for other people's help. You are absolutely dependent on other people, if you really think about it. You can't even bake your own bread half the time. You have to go to the shop and you have to get your bread from the shop. And that shopkeeper, chances are, they haven't baked the bread either. They had to get it from the baker. And that baker could never have baked the bread in the first place unless he went to the farmer who actually got the wheat and ground it into flour, you know, and the cycle just goes on. The entire society is built on structure and on structured dependence. You're all using devices right now, and we all pride ourselves. Look how far we've come when it comes to technology. If that technology breaks, God forbid, if your phone breaks, I don't pray that for anybody, by the way. It's a horrible thing when it happens. You don't know how to fix it yourself, unless you're a technical engineer. You don't know how to fix your own fridge. You don't know how to fix your own. You don't. If you were left in a jungle, none of this technology, pretty much, would you be able to recreate, even if you lived for a very long time. Think about that. How dependent we are. We're always asking for help. Every time you get sick and you go to the doctor, what are you doing? Oh, doctor, heal me. Every time you need to learn something new, you go to the teacher and you say, teacher, heal my ignorance. You're asking for help all the time. So what does this verse really mean? Did the prophets and imams bake their own bread? Did they never depend on anybody else? Did they live in a completely independent reality of their own? Or were they actually part and parcel of the society? Did they walk around in the markets? Did they eat food which was made by other people? They were also, just like us, a part of society. And therefore, we have to ask this question: what does it mean when we are saying, oh Allah, you alone do we ask for help? And the answer, of course, is that everything, all things that we see as dependencies, are actually just wasilas. Wasilas. They are a means to reach the help of Allah. When you go to the doctor, it's not the doctor who's healing you. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is healing you through the doctor, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has actually gifted with the knowledge of healing and has given him good health himself so that he's able to heal others. If you're eating bread, and you think, oh, it's the shopkeeper who gave me this. You've done shirk actually. It's not the shopkeeper who gave it to you, it's Allah who gave it to you through the shopkeeper. Oh, I was able to buy this thing and I was able to help myself. You can't help yourself. You can't help others either. Only Allah can help people. And if you're lucky, you can be a type of wasila between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and other people. A mother, when she gives birth to her child, I created this child. Look at the power in my hands. No mother does that. When the baby is born, she just bursts into tears because there's this overwhelming realization of the reality that she has no power. She could have, God forbid, died at any time. The child could have died in her womb, God forbid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who made that baby be born and conceived and created. And that baby is each and every one of us. We were all created in that way. And we were all completely dependent upon our mothers. And then when we were growing older, our fathers and the society and our families. Allah is the one who gave you all of that. And He could take it away. Okay, so we have to understand Allah never, as far as I can see, I can't think of, I can hardly think of anything at all, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created by simply saying, kun fayakun, and bing, it just appeared. Never. Right? If you look at a plant, maybe you have a plant right now in the corner of your room. Look at that plant, right? Allah could have said, oh, you're just going to appear. Dun, it just appeared. No, He didn't do that. He created a system of wasilas, and through that system of wasilas, that plant ended up in your room, right? Somebody planted that seed, right? And then that seed had to grow through the sun and the air and the carbon dioxide / oxygen and the soil and all the rest of it. And then somebody put it in the shop or maybe in your garden, and then eventually you dug it up or you bought it and you brought it into your house, i.e. you were the wasila of God in bringing that plant into your house. Okay, so this is a very important point, which if we don't understand, we won't understand the creation. And without understanding the creation, we're going to be a step away from understanding the Creator. Okay? إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Then, after recognizing all these points, does the one dua come. What is that dua, dear brothers and sisters? اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Guide us to the right path, or more accurately, the straight path. Guide us to the straight path. If we have the attitude that I am a Muslim, I have the Quran, I have the Prophet, I have the Ahlul Bayt, I am already guided. Oh yeah. Ha! Then this verse is not going to have any impact on us whatsoever. We're actually doing something completely vain, right? We're actually mocking it while we're reciting it. Because while our lips are reciting, oh God, guide us to the straight path, in our heads we're thinking, I'm already on the straight path. But thanks anyway, God, right? And this is absolute arrogance. And this is something that most Muslims, I would argue that, I don't know, most Muslims, I'll just repeat that again, who actually think that they've already got the right path. To recite repetitively, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, guide us to the straight path, we are affirming the fact that we are entirely dependent on Allah and we are not guided. We need guidance constantly, absolutely constantly. We're in need of guidance every single moment of our day. Every single decision that comes in front of us, we need guidance in respect to it. Should I sleep now or should I not? Should I wake up? Should I go back to sleep and put the alarm clock on snooze? Should I eat this or should I eat that? Is this haram or is this halal? Is it better for me to make friends with that person or this person? Should I apply for that job or this job? Should I study this or that? Should I even do even the minutest thing, like have a sip of tea. Should I? Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Without the guidance of Allah, we are not going to be guided every step of the way. The best servants of Allah are those who are most attached to Him, almost like babies are attached to their mothers, and they recognize just how dependent they are on Allah for every single guidance, every single decision that they need to make in life, inshallah. But then Allah doesn't leave it there. The final verse of this surah defines that straight path. And herein lies the crux. Because many people assume that when you're reciting the salah, you should only think of God, nothing else, just God. Allah, 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 Allah. And while there's a truth behind that, sorry, the salah is only for Allah. Allah actually draws our attention to people. Even in Salatul Layl, which inshallah we're taking advantage of these beautiful and extraordinary nights of Ramadan, we're reciting Salatul Layl, you'll notice that one of the things we've been commanded to do, in the last rak'at of Salatul Layl, you put your hands up, and what do? You don't just say, oh Allah, this, that, and the other. You say, oh Allah, this person, forgive them. This person, forgive them. This person, forgive them. You're starting to think of people in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And in this verse, what we see is Allah is drawing our attention to something which is very current, actually. He says, صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. The path. What is that straight path? It is the path of those upon whom Allah has bestowed His blessings, His bounties, His ni'mah. Right? Who are those people? We should try to identify them. Go to other verses of the Quran. Right? If you've downloaded that app, like I asked you to do, inshallah, you can go to Surah Al-Fatiha, where it says, أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ. Click on the word ni'mah, and you'll see all the other verses which use that word or derivations of that word, and you'll see where Allah talks about those upon whom His ni'mah has descended. And to put it very shortly, of course, it's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is a rahmatul lil alameen, a mercy for the worlds, and his progeny, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and the 124,000 prophets prior to them, and the Imams whose names we don't even remember throughout the history of the human race, right? The good people, immediately. And this is where I want to bring it down to our level and make us understand that it's actually making the Quran very relevant to today. And it's telling us, try to understand who the good people are around you. Follow their path. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Not the path of those who have earned the wrath of Allah, nor the path of those who have gone astray. Okay? And those are the people who are so crooked, so evil. Can you imagine that great merciful one who introduces himself as that merciful, how disgusting must such certain human beings be? How putrid, how vile, how psychopathic, how evil must some human beings be to deserve the wrath of Allah? I mean, wow. There was a guy who was preaching in the time of Imam Baqir or Imam Sadiq alayhimus salam, and he was telling the people, brothers, it's very difficult to go to Jannah. You have to do this, you have to do that. It's very hard. Imam Sadiq or Imam Baqir alayhi salam, he said the opposite. He said, actually, that's not true. It's very difficult, in fact, to go to hell. I mean, my God, you must have gone out of your way to be bad. Inshallah, when we're in Jannah, yeah, we're going to be looking down at people in hell and be like, oh my God, you actually tried your utmost to anger Allah. You did you went out of your way to do so much evil that you ended up there. Like, Jesus Christ, you must be awful. And then there's a really poignant part. Some of the scholars ask this question: why does Allah, in the recitation of the Quran, elongate that very last word? وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ, and those who have gone astray. You notice they always elongate that last part. And one of the things that the scholars have mentioned is that, look, maybe it's so that our attention lingers on that last point. That final point, Allah wants us to just give it a little bit more care, attention, let it stay in our hearts. Because there are some people who might not have earned the wrath of Allah, but they still went astray. And those are the people who are naive. Those are the people who, despite being warned, assumed that evil doesn't exist. Those are the people who, even when they are told hell has been created, and I won't go into the descriptions of hell, but it's terrifying if you actually read the hadith concerning it. When you tell them that hell exists, they think to themselves, nah, it can't be. Allah is so merciful. It's not possible that hell can exist. They say these things because for them, they can't comprehend the fact that evil people really and truly do exist. And if you are not careful, those people, while pretending to be ultra pious, ultra religious, ultra knowledgeable, ultra good, will deceive you and take you to the same hell that they themselves are headed towards. Okay, so it actually ends on a very poignant, sad, and scary point to keep us on guard. On that note, inshallah, we're going to end this discussion and we're going to go to the Q&A. And as I said, if you guys have your own extrapolations, you are more than welcome to share them, inshallah. And don't hesitate to do that, by the way, because there's always going to be somebody who benefits from you, inshallah. All right, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Let's recite a loud and boisterous salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Okay, anybody putting their hands up? I also remember that there were some questions from yesterday's session which I didn't have time to answer, and maybe I'll have a few moments to answer them today. Okay, I don't see any hands up, so oh, Sister Fatim Hatab, one of the usual suspects. All right, so we'll go to Sister Fatim Hatab, and I'm just while your microphone is being okay, Bismillah.
Bismillah. Well, maybe boring suspect at this point.
No.
Assalamu alaikum. So,
Well,
the you just said when the Imam said that it's actually more difficult to go to hell. Like there is so many times we mention and we say a lot of people will go to hell, or sometimes even we say most people will go to hell. And I want to relate this also to the Surah Al-Asr when it says وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ فِي خُسْرٍ. So like it says all people except those, and then it lists like it's a very difficult list to fulfill. Like إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Like it sounds like a short list, but when you think about it, about each one of those details, it is extremely difficult to achieve, to genuinely be like that. It is
yeah.
described. So when it says at loss, does it mean going to hell, or does this hadith maybe turn the focus away from going to hell and rather mean at loss in a different way when in comparison?
Yeah, it's a very good comparison that you've made there, and it's a very good question as well. See, the Quran, whenever it uses the word insan, Human, it's usually, as far as I can tell, it's always negative. Humans are, they're just awful. They really are awful. Okay. And you only need to open your eyes and just look at society to understand just how awful humanity is. All right. 99.99999% of humanity is just completely lost. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر. It says لفي خسر. They're not just lost, they're inside lost, right? They are in loss. They're in a maze, and they're too asleep to even recognize that they're lost in order to find their way, right? Now, does that mean that they're all going to hell? No. Allah is so merciful that, you know, I'm lost, and I'm just trying to find my way as well. But I have faith, inshallah, that Allah is going to help me to, pass those tests which I'm going to have to face in the hereafter. And we're going to get through it, inshallah. Um, See, Allah, through these kinds of verses, out of his mercy, he doesn't let you just settle for the least possible state. He tries to pull you towards the best possible potential that you can reach, right? In one verse, what does he say? وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Don't die unless you are Muslims, right? Don't die unless you are Muslims, right? Because that's the lowest possible state that you can actually reach, to be a Muslim, to submit to the will of Allah, to say, oh Allah, whatever you say is correct, and I want to do whatever you say, and I won't, rebel against it, right? But he's saying, try to be a believer, which is a level far higher than a mere Muslim, right? And you should try to push yourself to be among those people, as Surah Asr teaches us to be, who enjoin patience, who enjoin good, who do who go that extra mile, you know? And so it's all about your effort. And I think we mentioned this in a previous session also, that a lot of the emphasis in the Quran about going to Jannah and about becoming one of the good is all about effort. You have to really ask yourself, yes, we all face struggles, right? And Allah actually helps us to overcome those struggles. But how many of us voluntarily enter difficulties for the sake of Allah? Have you thought about that? Many of us, for example, we go through poverty. Oh, Allah help us. And then Allah helps us. And then we become better Muslims, right? Or, oh, Allah, I don't feel spiritual. I want to feel spiritual. And so Allah helps us to become more spiritual. Or we feel sad. And so when we turn to Allah, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Surely in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest, right? And so a lot of these things, they're about in order to make ourselves feel better and to avoid difficult and trials and tribulations in the world. But how many people are willing to dive into those same difficulties, that poverty, that pain, that fear, that hunger, voluntarily? Now, I'm not just talking about fasting, right? But going that step further in order to serve the cause of Allah. How many people are really willing to do that? Now, out of those people, how many of them, they do it sincerely? And then it goes on and on and on. So anyway, I've gone off on a tangent as I usually do, but sister, don't worry. Most of us, inshallah, even some of us who are not even Muslim, perhaps, we're going to eventually get to Jannah, because even on their deathbeds, even if they don't say it necessarily, a lot of people, they're good people at the end of the day, and they die with this sincerity in their hearts, and they recognize, oh my God, you have always been there and I've disobeyed you. They repent in those final moments, and they recognize that this is not the end, and they die in that state. Those are the people who have recognized these greater truths, right? But at the same time, you have to understand that the people who are evil, whenever Allah is talking about hellfire, and He's reminding you just how terrifying the hellfire is and how everlasting it is, it doesn't end. You really have to recognize the extent of evil that exists in the society. You have to understand that many of these people, the only reason that they are not killing others, eating babies, I don't know, enjoining cannibalism. I don't know, the worst of the worst things that you could possibly think of. The only reason a lot of people are not doing those things is because they're afraid of going to prison or getting caught. Right? And that's a really scary thought. But you have to understand that many people are that way. But denying that is not going to help us at all. I hope that helped a little bit, inshallah. Okay, we'll
Yes.
take one more.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Sister Fatima, did you have something to add to that? Okay, okay. All right, if we can go to Mueed Isa Zarqa.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa
Thank you for
alaikum
the
salam.
uh, thank you for the lecture. It was really good. I had a question. I think it was mostly about the last ayah of Surah Fatiha.
Okay.
I was mostly thinking about how I guess to in the sense of like doing jihad and things, how to I guess purify our intentions, especially based on that last ayah of how to because just to purify our intentions on that point. If you could help.
Um, Sorry, could you just purifying intentions as per that? I'm not
Oh,
sure
sorry.
exactly what. Yeah.
It's yes, it's mostly purifying our intentions and doing jihad in the way of fulfilling the last ayah,
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes
like
sense.
following
So
the
yeah, I got you. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, so it's a very important point actually because what the final verse is actually showing you, it's highlighting for you that there's good guys and bad guys in the world, right? And therefore, within that is this whole concept of jihad and fighting in the way of Allah, recognizing that those evildoers really do exist. And if you don't stop them, if you don't step up, like any superhero movie that you have ever watched, any movie or any drama, like we talked about the whole narrative theory, the entire world, dear brothers and sisters, is nothing but an epic reality. And if you don't step up to become one of those heroes to confront the villains of the time, those who have earned the wrath of Allah and those who have gone astray, you are going to be complicit in the world becoming a terrible place. This is a message that people should have learned maybe 100 years ago, then we would be living in a better world right now. Now, let's try 1,000 years. No, let's try 1,400 years ago. If people had understood this central idea, then we would be living in a very, very lovely world right now. The problem with humanity is they don't wake up to this reality that there's a good camp, those who have earned the blessings and the ni'mah of Allah, and an evil camp, right? And recognizing that will help us to reach, inshallah, a sense of sincerity in serving the cause. Okay, we'll take one more question or comment from Sister Zinat Hosseini, and then we'll go to the next part of the session,
Assalamu alaikum.
inshallah. Wa alaikum salam.
So my question was that how to have a good connection with families, like relatives,
Beats
despite
me. No, I'm joking.
despite being
I'm
like
joking.
sometimes families have jealousy, little bit
Yeah.
fights, and it's just because like Muslim people, they don't really try to learn what is Islam, and they just want to bring Islam to the connection and see like how Islam is good, and also being like have a good connection with family, like relatives.
Okay, in what sense though? Because having a good connection with the relatives is just keeping everything light. You just have to crack some jokes, let things slide, forgive them, just be nice to them because Alhamdulillah, it's a blessing to be part of a family. And as long as you don't do anything absolutely against the code of conduct of that family, then you're going to be fine. The problem occurs when you take a radical path, right? Or that which is considered by the tribe or by the family to be radical. And this is a problem that you can see exemplified among reverts, right? Especially for revert sisters, this is a recurring problem that they have, is when they become Muslim, they start adopting hijab. Suddenly they can't eat the pork that their mother has prepared. Christmas is there, they're all drinking alcohol. You have to excuse yourself from the party, right? And so this is part of their struggle, and they have to really, really try hard in order to keep that balance and that, that amicable relationship alive with their family while maintaining their deen and sticking to their own principles, right? For many Muslims, even if you have a Muslim family, when you yourself take a radical path, or you take the next step in the deen, this is going to be a recurring problem for you also, because, for example, the family might still be listening to haram music. You don't want to do that anymore. The family might be, I don't know, they might be listening to a certain political tract which you've recognized as evil, but they continue to do it. And these are all going to create all sorts of rifts and problems, and you have to really learn how to balance it, just like a revert. All right. And this is a really good point to end on, actually, because it shows that, look, it doesn't matter which family you were born into, whether you were a non-Muslim or a Muslim, or it doesn't really matter. What matters is the struggle that you undertake in order to improve yourself, inshallah. Through that struggle, that is going to be the measure of your worth on the Day of Judgment, inshallah. Keeping relations with your family is extremely important. And if, God forbid, it gets terrible to the point where they are absolutely intolerable, at that point, you should at least just say salam to them. At least just say Eid Mubarak, right? At the very least, just call them up, say, how are you doing? This is okay. I'm not going to say this point because it's a bit controversial, and I've run out of time. I hope that you guys have benefited and learned, inshallah, from this session, and I hope that it's been a good and fruitful reminder for you, inshallah. And we're going to go for a short break, and then we're going to go to Sayyid's session. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.